warehouse is built to have upwards of 3 million barrels of bourbon being aged here at Buffalo Trace. So for those of you that like our product, hats off to you. We appreciate it, okay? So how does this process work? How do you get these 18 different bourbons out of 3 different recipes? Well, the way it works is very similar to your house at home. In the summertime, what's hotter, your attic or your basement? Your attic, right? So if you were to do a science experiment, you were to wet 2 towels, put 1 wet towel in your attic, 1 wet towel in your basement. Which towel would dry first? Attic, right? Same thing happens in here. Now outside right now it's 69 degrees, okay? But up on the top floor, it's still pretty warm up there. It's probably 120 up there right now. So it's much warmer, okay? So that being said, you put a wet barrel of bourbon on the top floor, you put a wet barrel of bourbon down here with us. That top floor is going to have different experiences up there. That wood is going to dry out faster, which is going to allow that bourbon to soak in it more, take on more of those flavors, taste, and colors more aggressively up there than what it would down here, okay? So that being said, you'll have different experiences from top to bottom. Now, the aging process is extremely important. How many of you have ever been to Maker's Mark before? So if you've ever been to Maker's, you know at Maker's that they'll rotate their barrels. And I don't mean side to side, I mean from top to bottom. They'll start by putting a barrel in on the top floor. After a year or 2, they'll move it to the middle floor. After another year or 2, they'll move it to the bottom floor. And at the end of that rotation, they'll dump those barrels together, stir them up, pour it into a bottle. And the reason they're able to do that, the reason it's so consistent, is because they have one major flavor, one major product that they're producing. That is Maker's Mark. Now at Buffalo Trace, we have 18 different products that we're producing when it comes to bourbon. And so we don't rotate our barrels. We leave them exactly where they are until that barrel is ready to meet the bottle. So, that being said, the aging process is extremely important. Going back to Warehouse D on the side up at the top, you remember how the brick was a different color?
Yeah.
Well, what happened is, back in 2006, we had a tornado that came through. Knocked all of that brick off. Peeled the roof back like a tin can. The cool thing was, and the thing that proves that there is a God, is the fact that we did not lose a single barrel of bourbon. But what it did, it exposed all of those barrels. They were exposed to the elements at that point. The temperature was different. The barometric pressure was different. The aging process had changed. So they put the building back together again, which took some time. Put it back together again. The master distiller said, well, let's see what we can salvage. He went to the top floor of that warehouse. He took his whiskey thief. And a whiskey thief isn't like this sketchy friend that steals your whiskey. A whiskey thief, if you look right there, that long copper tube, can you point to that for me right there? Yep, thank you. So that is a whiskey thief. A whiskey thief is the same principle as what you would do when you were a kid in the restaurant. Remember when you were a kid in the restaurant? You'd take your drink, stick your straw down in your drink, put your thumb over it, pull it out, and you drink out of the straw, right? Same thing here, but on an adult scale. So Master Distiller went up there and said, well, let's see what we can salvage. He took his whiskey thief, he pulled the plug out of the barrel, he stuck his whiskey thief down in it, he put his thumb over it, he pulled it out, he poured it in a glass, he sniffed it, and went, huh. He tasted it, and went, wow, that's some of the best bourbon I've ever had. And when it's some of the best bourbon you've ever had, you don't dump it in Kentucky River, you bottle it, you sell it. And so it became this product that I'm sure you have all heard of. The name of it just rolls right off your tongue when you say it. It was called Colonel E.H. Taylor's Warehouse C Tornado Surviving Bourbon. Have you heard of that one? Probably not. Not a lot of bottles of it. People ask all the time, they say, well, if it was so good, when are you going to come out with another release of it? Hopefully never, but we're doing something to try to get kind of close. So as you guys pulled in, if you saw the stone mansion up on your left, just next to that stone mansion is a new warehouse for us. It's built in 2013, called Warehouse X. Does anybody know what that X stands for?
Experimental.
Experimental. That's right. That's our experimental warehouse. Inside of that warehouse, there are different chambers. Some of those chambers have big sunlight, so those barrels are getting a lot of sun. Some chambers have UV light, so those barrels are being aged with UV light. Some chambers have no light. Some chambers have really good heaters. We're cranking it up to 140, 160 even. Some chambers have really good air conditioners. We're taking it down to 10 or even negative 10. So we're experimenting with how we're aging those barrels of bourbon. So it goes to show you just how important the aging process truly is. Now with this aging process, there's a unique byproduct that takes place. And for you guys to fully experience that, what I want you to do, I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes and take a deep breath in. Everybody breathe in. Breathe out. All right, open your eyes. That's called bourbon yoga. I try to do that 3 times a day. It's very good for your health. Does anybody know what you're smelling? There's a name for it. Close. Angel share. Angel share. Angel share. So what is angel share? Well, angel share is the evaporation that comes out of these barrels. So how much is being evaporated? Well, day one we fill these barrels up and they're 53 gallons. Does anybody know what our oldest bourbon is? Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year-old. Now, we've got some older ones than that. We've got a 25-year-old Rip Van Winkle that came out this past year. We had an OFC that was distilled way back in 1983. So we've got some older stuff than that, but the one that we release every year is this Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old. Now, when we say a bottle or a bourbon is 23 years old or 10 years old or 2 years old, that's not a figure of speech. That means that barrel will rest on that rick for 23 years before it's dumped out and poured into a bottle. So the very person that could have loaded that barrel could very well be retired by the time that barrel meets a bottle. So day one, we fill that barrel up and it's 53 gallons, 525 pounds completely full. On the last day of that 23rd year when we go to dump that barrel out, we are ecstatic. Ecstatic if we've got 6 to 8 gallons left. So you lose a lot to the angels. Now what's that teach us from economics class? You guys remember? Supply and demand. Demand is up here. Everybody wants them a bottle of Pappy. Supply, not so much. So what's that do to the cost? It raises it, right? Now we know that bourbon's only going to be 3 of 4 total ingredients. So you're not paying different amounts based off of the ingredients of your bourbon. A wheated bourbon does not cost more than a rye bourbon. What you're paying for is the aging of that bourbon. Not just how long it's aged, but where in the warehouse it's aged. The real estate from floor to floor is not the same. So that being said, are we down here with the cheap stuff, or are we with the expensive stuff on the bottom floor? I ask you this way. When you go to a liquor store,